Banmali and Ram, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for coming to Pune yesterday, especially for our morning sessions today. I couldn't ask for a more favored way of ending the NTW program than this combination of Banmali Agrawala and Ram Guha. Banmali is among my absolutely favorite leaders of corporate India. We've known each other through CI. That's where we met. We've been together on a whole variety of different CI entities. Many years ago, how many years ago? About 18 years ago, I was the chair of CI Maharashtra, and then Banmali followed me as the chair of CI Maharashtra. About 5 or 7 years later, Banmali was the chair of the CI Western region, and I followed him as the chair of the CI Western region. And we've also gone on a trip together where we went to China to try to figure out, together with, by the way, 𝗕𝗫𝗺 and several others, 𝗕𝗫𝗺 𝗡𝘂 and others, to try to figure out what made, this was in 2009, 8 or 9, no, 2000, this was in 2004, to try to figure out what made Chinese industry so competitive. And I think I told some of you the story that after our exhaustive visit to China involved visiting an umbrella shop instead of an umbrella factory, and a bicycle repair shop instead of a bicycle factory, because that's what they would show us. But anyway, Banmali, the relationship has grown. Banmali has been on our board, for our company board, Forbes Marshall board, for several years now, maybe 6 years, 7 years, and is a wonderful board member. We send out our accounts, and within an hour of the accounts going out, there will be 7 questions back, and really good questions. And they are the kinds of questions that, keep one focused on the right things as an organization. Banmali is also on the Nayanta board and is one of the founders of Nayanta University. And equally there, I think his presence on the Nayanta board keeps us focused on the right things, the right kinds of discipline, the right kinds of issues that we need to address, and so on. So I think he makes a simply terrific board member, and that's one of the topics that we'll explore. And then we have Ram Guha. Ram is, one of my favorite people in general, and certainly my favorite author. As those few of you who've read my book would know, Ram's India After Gandhi is one of my 5 favorite books, but many of his other books are also right at the top of books that I've benefited so massively from reading. And we'll do these 2 conversations as back-to-back conversations. And the theme is broadly as follows, and I'm mentioning it now so that you all have some advance warning and can think of questions and comments that you'd like to make. The theme is roughly as follows, that after some of the initial background of how did Banmali become Banmali and how did Ram become Ram, we will go on to talk about Banmali's dreams of Indian industry, and we've said his realistic dreams of Indian industry, but still dreams, and going with those to make those dreams reality. What's the role of all of us in this room? And then when we have the conversation with Ram, the question that we're going to talk with him about is, what are his realistic dreams for India as a country? And what's the role of all of us in this room? What role can we play in helping make that dream a reality? So that's the way in which we thought we would do these 2 conversations, as a way of bringing NTW, except for the afternoon quiz, to an end. Okay, I had to say that, otherwise 𝗕𝗺 would be very upset with me. Okay, so Banmali, a little bit of background first. Where did you grow up? You spent a lot of time growing up in Pune. But little background on where did you grow up? What were the big influences growing up? And how did you come to, I think 𝗕𝗺 was the first job. So how did you come to join 𝗕𝗺? How did you come to join this Finnish company, which at that time was not so well known, at least in India? Yeah.
So first of all, thank you so much, Naushad. I think we have a mutual admiration society. If Naushad would say, I'm setting up a gambling den, and would you join me? And I'd say yes. I think so. That's how much I admire and respect Naushad as an individual, and obviously for all that he's accomplished. It's a privilege to be in the presence of Ram and Sujata. I was just looking at the number of books kept on the table there. It's really intimidating. And I don't think all of those books that Ram has written are out there. So it's
about half, I think.
It's about half. So really a privilege to be here in your presence. And of course, some common friends. I was just looking at Sudhanshu. Can you just send me the list of participants that are attending? And I noticed there are a couple of colleagues ex-GE, some from Tata Electronics, and of course, a bunch from folks as well. So really a privilege and a pleasure to be amongst people who are friends. To your question, Naushad, I think, we were just chatting, Sujata, while we were walking around the campus. I grew up in Pune. And I've got some really fond memories. I think I had a very fortunate childhood because Pune as a place, and that to the Pune University, because both my parents were teachers. They were both professors of law. In fact, my father set up the law department in the Pune University. The Pune University, in that time, and I'm talking about early 60s, was perhaps one of the most beautiful university campuses anywhere in the country. More than 400 acres of pristine land, thick forests. I think they typically imported Australian shrubs out there to plant them, just given the arid nature and so on and so forth. It was simply a delight. And imagine a childhood where you're going to a friend's place through forests, or going to the school, which is not too far away from here, by climbing a hill. These are things which perhaps you read in books, but I think I had the privilege of experiencing that. Also, being a child of academics, I think did have a phenomenal influence on who I am and who I grew up to be. And mind you, my mother was also a professor, and my father went to Harvard Law School, my mother went to Yale, and that to an early 50s. I think she was one of the first few Indian women to have actually been there. Those things have a certain impact because the kind of conversations, and the Pune University at the time did produce some phenomenal scholars and leaders, intellectual thinkers, Wrangler, 𝗕𝗺 𝗕𝗺. I can just go on down the list. So just even as a 10-year-old and 8-year-old, the conversations that one kind of heard were simply phenomenal. So in short, a very fortunate childhood got me thinking, in a sense, overwhelming with so many highly literate and all these kind of people around. But it did make a difference. I think in terms of joining up 𝗕𝗺, I started after finishing education and all with Bajaj Auto here on the shop floor, got selected for research and development, enjoyed myself. Imagine you're a fresh engineer and you come out and the first thing that is given to you, I managed to get into the research and development part, which was, I think the first 3 or 4 graduate engineers could get into research and development. And you're given a bunch of keys. And that was the time when the first few motorcycles were making their entry into India. And I was given a bunch of keys by the head of R&D to say, take these, drive them around, and just come back and tell me how you feel. I said, this is heaven. You give, a 21, 22-year-old a bunch of keys to the latest motorcycle. In what more do you want? So I enjoyed myself. But I developed jaundice, and I was working on emissions on those motorcycles, and I was told, look here, you can't be on the shop floor anymore. You have to move out. And that's when I think 𝗕𝗿, which gave me an opportunity to get into sales and marketing, came along, and that's how I kind of joined them. So not by design, but more by default. But I'm glad I did, because it turned out pretty good.
So, one of the things that Banmali is that will come across is he's an amazing ambassador for Finland.
Oh, yeah.
And it started at 𝗕𝗿, and then you lived in Finland for a while as well. I wonder if you could say something about that.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, maybe I'm too biased as far as the Nordic part of the world is concerned, and particularly Finland is concerned. But I do believe, one keeps looking at different models, socio-economic models of how to run a country and so on and so forth. I think they come as close to perfection as is possible. I can spend a day kind of going through all of that. And I dismiss the argument that just because there are 5.5 million people, therefore they can do it, and larger countries cannot. I don't agree with that thesis at all. I think it's just the way the country is, the culture, the strength of the primary education system, their commitment to civic sense, and there are so many things I can go on. But I think it is truly exemplary. It's amazing to see how they've maintained that over the years. And I wish they would talk about it a little more for the rest of the world to stand up and take notice and learn from them. I can assure you, many of the things that you will go through, especially as a liberal arts school and university, you will find that in practice out there. And I think that is something which is worth noting. So, huge fan. Don't get me started, Naushad. I won't be able to stop.
Well, I'll say one more thing though. We were chatting yesterday, and Banmali is on the board of 𝗕𝗿 Elevators, which is a huge Finnish company about to become huger. It's just in the process of acquiring 𝗕𝗿 Elevators, which will make 𝗕𝗿 the world's largest elevator company by a long way. I think it'll be a combined revenue of 40 billion.
About 30 billion, yes.
Euros. I mean,
that's right. That's right.
It's quite mind-blowing. And he mentioned, I'm not sure that was confidential, but he asked the chairman, why aren't you happy running this $12 billion company? Why do you want to make it even bigger with this huge risk of making this massive acquisition of a company that's German, that's bigger than you, and the chairman, who is from the family that started 𝗕𝗿, gave Banmali a book in reply, and maybe you could mention that.
Yes, so I mean, 𝗕𝗿 is one of the oldest companies. It's a family-owned company, though publicly listed, more than 100 years old. 12 billion euros of revenue, zero debt, $1.2 billion of cash sitting on the balance sheet. Tell me how many companies in the world have that kind of a financial situation. They've got about a 15% global market share, no threat in the world to what they're doing. They've got that kind of quote-unquote dominance. And here they want to go and acquire an almost equal-sized company, take on about 14 billion of debt. 𝗕𝗿, who's the chairman, personally putting in about $1 billion of his own equity as cash contribution. And we recently just had the EGM where the proposal was cleared, and it was cleared by 99.5% of the shareholders voting to go through this. And if you read any analysis of is this a good acquisition, etc., a lot of it is very cautious. It's a difficult one. You're paying too much. The integration will be difficult, and so on. So I asked 𝗕𝗿, who's the chairman, I said, 𝗕𝗿, why do you want to do this? I know we've discussed it in the board, but tell me what really drove you. And then prompt he came out with this book. We were having a lunch after the EGM. It was called The Winter Wars. And this was about the war that Finland fought with Russia in 39. And it was a short war, the first one, because it was followed by another one which was called the Moscow War, with Finland as well, where Finland had to incur heavy reparations to Russia, $300 million at that point in time, in about
to become independent.
To become independent, and because anyway, it's all in the book. And he says the basic essence in the book is that Russia, a far bigger country, Finland, a completely agrarian economy at that time, people literally fighting with sickles in snow and so on and so forth. But they still continue to prevail over this mighty Russia. They did have to cede about 11% of their land, but they just had to, because given their determination, and there's a Finnish word for it called sisu, which can't really be translated into anything. You just have to look it up and understand it. But because of that determination, they kind of went through. So my point was, Auntie, so what's that got to do with this? He said about 25 years ago, 𝗕ᵐ elevators wanted to buy Kone. The deal was almost done. My father, that is Auntie Herlin's father, had agreed to everything. The next morning, the papers had to be signed and simply given. Everything was cooked and baked. And his father asked Auntie the previous evening, Auntie, I hope you're okay, we're going ahead with this. And Auntie said, I think we should keep the business. This is an easier option to just sell it and get out. I think we should keep it. We should not sell it. So they did not sell the business. There were some other reasons. I think 𝗕ᵐ wanted certain changes in the agreement. So they had a legitimate reason as to why not to proceed rather than just to win. But they did not go ahead with the deal. And he said, ever since then, when he took over the business, I decided I am going to buy 𝗕ᵐ elevators. 25 years in the making, that thought. And at that time, I think Kone Elevators must have been a very small company, brewing in his mind. At the EGM, one of the shareholders kind of asked Auntie, you've had this dream for more than 20 odd years, and it's finally come true. He said, yes, it has. So it wasn't something that he just kept within. It was pretty well known. It was public knowledge that Auntie would, at some point in time, want to buy this. And I think it just goes to show what history does to a set of people, what war does to a certain set of people. How do you get so determined that you need to you kind of go ahead with it and make such kind of decisions? I think a lot of learning. So I'm still going through the book, but it's interesting indeed.
Thanks, Banmali. Ranjan. So by the way, the deal is that Ranjan is supposed to chip in. Now, knowing Ranjan, log might be a better word than chip, but
it's a big chip.
Yeah. So,
so I had.
You have to use the mic.
So I had two kind of thoughts. One is that, and this is more because it relates to my own experience also. When you look at having two teachers as parents, how did that influence your values as a leader? How is that?
I think, Ranjan, that's a great question. I think first it just opened my eyes and just the way one would think, even relative to, and I'm saying that relative to my classmates in school. And I realized that I was thinking differently. Let me give you a couple of examples. 1975, emergency, 75, I think somewhere 75. Around there, 75. My parents, particularly my father, was livid, right? I think the Pune University, the faculty, various teachers and professors were almost short of being up in arms against it, were, all there. Couple of the professors arrested. My father maybe was one of them who was about to be, but didn't happen. And just the whole discussion around the dining table with other faculty that was in staff about what is this. In that, during emergency, if you'd recall, they had suspended the Habeas Corpus Act. For a law professor, there could be nothing more blasphemous than suspending the act of habeas corpus, which basically means that the state has absolute control. You're not even obliged as a state to produce the individual if you arrest and so on and so forth.
Habeas corpus says you're innocent until proven guilty.
And you have to be produced, because the suspension of that act basically meant that you could be arrested and you did not have to be produced in a court of law. You could be thrown away somewhere in a dungeon. I still remember my mother sitting down and explaining to me, what does habeas corpus mean? I think these things... How old were you then? I was 12. These things had an immense impact on the way you thought. I'll give you another example. One of my close friends of my parents was a lady in the Delhi University by the name of 𝗕𝗵𝗃 𝗙𝗀𝗃. She was a professor of law in the Delhi University, a contemporary of my parents. Her husband was Chancellor, a very famous journalist. Maybe Ram, maybe you know them as well. He was an absolutely fearless writer, I think dubbed as a CIA agent, had to be arrested and so on. And we used to talk. I mean, he used to come home and all that. And I was fascinated by this person. That what a man. You know, I mean, he's writing. I mean, this is what I want to be in life. You know, I want to be a journalist. And my father said, yeah, you just have to study a little bit. You know, I mean, you just can't sit at home and be a journalist. But those are the kind of influences, I think, that really made a difference. But above all, I think the realization that respect and dignity, which a teacher commands, is much more valuable than any other material reward. I'll just close with one more example, Sean, which is, I remember there was a Japanese student that my parents had in the university. When he was leaving, he had a cycle, you know, a really fancy bicycle that he had to roam around the campus. When he was leaving, he couldn't carry it back. So he came home one day and he got the cycle and he told my parents, this is for your son because I'm going back, I don't need it. And, you know, I'd like to present it to him. And my father just turned around and said, I'm sorry, but I can't accept it. And I was, you know, standing behind him, hiding, you know, looking, eyeing that cycle, salivating and all of that. And my father just said, no, I will not take it because this is not right. Those are things that I think leave behind a very deep impression on who you are as a person. What are the important things? I'm still in touch with the students. I'm still in touch with the children of his students. It's a relationship, a bond, a respect that I think I don't know how to express it in words. So a lot of learning and a lot of how it shaped the way one thinks, one deals with people, and one values education and teaching as a profession.
Thank you. So my second one was related to starting your career and having sales and marketing very early. I landed up in sales and marketing accidentally, and I'm very grateful for it. So do you think, so I've had this perspective that for many people from a technical background, sales is not always a good word. You think every leader needs to sell and have the ability to sell? And what is your lens on?
I do think, I mean, now maybe I'm going to be a little provocative, but intentionally. I think selling is perhaps one of the most difficult jobs in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
To sell anything. It's one of the most difficult jobs in the world. So if you can sell, I think, you know, you can pretty much, you can learn to do many other things. So from that point of view, yes. And I still remember these discussions and debates even in GE, which is more important, sales or innovation, and, you know, and technology and so on and so forth.
I think I didn't frame the question well. Sales as the ability to persuade somebody to do something which you are yourself convinced about. Not necessarily selling a product, but sales as persuasive communication as an approach to life.
That too, but I would take that a step further to get someone to pay or give value to something that you have done. And that is the ultimate recognition of what you are trying to convey and say. So, I mean,
It's
in a way,
it's the
it
test.
is. It's a test. That's the ultimate test, and that's not easy. So, yes, I do think it's something that one should experience and go through.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks. So let's shift gears to board membership. Now, you've been on many boards, on, of course, the boards of the companies that you're directly involved in. Banmali also chaired many of the new Tata companies when Tata Electronics was first set up and Tata Infrastructure, I think, was first set up. I mean, several of the new Tata ventures. What's the role of chairing a board that you think makes for effectiveness and not? And what's the role of being a board member that makes for being a good board member and not? And you have experience with the 𝗕𝗃 board, for many, many years. Of course, the Nayanta board now, and over the last few years, as we've been involved in setting up the university, and of course the Forbes Marshall board. So, what's your experience? And I encourage Banmali to be very frank. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
First, let me just start by saying I think I'm still learning. I don't think I'm wise enough to be able to come to conclusions as to how should the chair of a board conduct himself or herself. But a couple of thoughts, and I'll take a few examples of. I've been privileged to look at people like 𝗕𝗃𝗺, work closely with them, Ratan Tata, Chandrasekharan right now, and see how they've kind of conducted themselves. And I think as a chair, the most important thing is to understand when is it that you need to step in and when is it that you need to step back. I think if you can get that balance right, I think you have, in a sense, quote unquote, arrived. It's easier said than done. The temptation is to step in much more, or you completely step back and let somebody else kind of handle it. So I think it is situational. It depends on the circumstances. It depends on what the culture of the place is. But I think having that balance is the most important thing. And since one does get to become chairman and all towards the let's say later years in a career, when is it that you actually, I wouldn't say retire, but have the confidence to believe in other people and not want to do things yourself? I think in India, we struggle with retirement, and struggle with, kind of hanging up our boots and so on. And I'm connecting that with being a chairman, because I think in some ways, both are, even though you become a chairman, you don't give up being a CEO. And I think that's a mistake we made. I would say the way I saw Ratan Tata conduct this role, to my mind, was perhaps the ideal way in which, if I had to fashion myself, that's how I would fashion myself. To the extent that he knew, just given the stature and the kind of person that he was, if he even opined on a certain subject in a board meeting, there was no way any board member would have a view which would be different from what he would say. And he would therefore insist on a discussion on a subject, go on for hours, and then maybe have his own point of view and be humble enough to change his opinion if, he thought that, there was something out there. As a board member, I think it is important to realize that you only speak up when you have something important to say or something worthwhile to say. I remember in the Tata Power board once, we had a bureaucrat who joined the board, I obviously won't take names, who after the first meeting asked the company secretary, will you tell me that are the commissions decided on the basis of how often we speak in the board meeting or how many times we raise our hand? And it was a genuine question. This gentleman was a very senior IAS officer, so I mean, he wasn't being frivolous when he asked the question. So, I mean, that's maybe an other extreme. But as a board member, that how are you able to speak up, have a point of view, for that, be well prepared, be well read, because without that, I don't think you can have a point of view. And one more thing is that if it's going in a certain direction and you do have a separate point of view, do speak up. We tend to kind of play along, read the room in a manner of speaking, be popular as a board member, and I think that is something which perhaps needs to be avoided.
Yeah. Eddie?
Yeah, I had something related to board and board membership, which is that, and then maybe this is stemming from my own experience. I've seen very, very qualified boards and leadership transitions, and this is more in academia. And the world seems to know that culture is declining. Visible numbers are not declining. So how is a board member, when cultural decline shows up in numbers only 5 years later, what is it that as a board member you can do? Because it seems to me that in any leadership transition, the role of the board is very high, because that's when a company can get damaged. So
I think that's a very important question, Ranjan. I think very few boards, at least in India, get that right at all. Just to kind of again give an example, in the Finnish board, when I joined the 𝗕𝗂𝗃 board, they have a concept called overboarding, which means that if you are on more than 2 or 3 boards, you're not an ideal candidate for us. Just 2 or 3, right? Because you need to give this time. We will make the opportunity for you to engage with the company, with the people, so that you begin to understand. It's not just once a quarter that you show your pretty face and that sit in a room and have a fancy meeting. I think that engagement is very crucial. I don't see that to a large extent in Indian boards. It's a very superficial engagement. And if you're not engaged, how are you going to judge the culture? What's happening at an N-2 level or deeper down into the organization? As a GE board member, I wasn't on the board, but one could meet with the board members. They had something like 8 to 9 meetings in a year. Every board member had to go and visit some part of GE somewhere in the world, immerse themselves for 2 days. Nobody else from the top management would be there, you and the people on the ground, just to understand what's going on. I think those are really great examples of how one should kind of see that. So the more the engagement as a board member, if you don't have the time, don't take it on. It's not a trophy, right? It's a commitment, and you need to find time to do it. Otherwise, don't do it. I find it very awkward that if I'm called upon for something and I say, but I'm sorry, I don't have the time for doing it. Why did I accept it? And again, it's a mistake that we make in India. I think so.
I agree fully. Yeah, absolutely. So let's turn to the topic that I mentioned right at the beginning. And this really, there was a particular prompt. There are many conversations over the years, but there was a particular prompt which was one of the boards that we're both on is the Nayanta board in India, and we had just finished a meeting in Delhi, and there was a reception on the lawn outside. It was sort of Delhi, early March, perfect weather, etc. And Banmali 𝗕𝗃𝗃, we had a conversation with Chandrajit as well in Delhi, and Banmali 𝗕𝗃𝗃 and I were talking, and Banmali made the comment, that Indian industry needs to be more ambitious. Indian industry needs to invest much more in manufacturing capacity, to have much greater confidence in the future of the country, and to be much more oriented to taking Indian industry forward in the country and overseas. Where did that come from? Why do you think so?
Sure, and another subject on which I can go on a rant maybe for about a day. But I do feel Indian industry has not demonstrated courage or spine or the willingness to take risk and be bold. And I don't think this is the time when one can just be kind of moving around the fringes, doing incremental things when there's so much of change happening around in the world. If you're not prepared to make yourself extremely uncomfortable, I think you are toast, you are done. And I just don't see the ability or the willingness, rather. Ability is there, but the willingness on the part of Indian industry to kind of take on certain challenges. Let me share with you an example. We set up Tata Electronics, as Naushad said, during the COVID period. It started off by a simple thing like Apple as a company coming and saying, we want to de-risk from China, we want to move to India, start making phones. Do you want to work with us? I said, yeah, making phones is not such a doesn't look like a difficult thing. Let's do it. So we plunged into it. Apple's not I have to be careful.
It's not an easy customer.
Okay, you said it. I didn't. It's a tough customer, but when you and Lawful is here, so I mean, when you work with the best, you learn so much that you can apply that to other places as well. So we decided, yes, we are going to make it work. They were, of course, building out that supply chain, looking for other partners, for other components, and so on. And when they went across to a few other large companies to say, would you work with us? And they came back to say, but your terms and conditions are way too onerous and we can't do it. At best, we would want to risk 100 crores of rupees and nothing more than that. And I'm like looking at these large companies and saying, why, if you're getting into something new, electronics is now the single largest manufactured item that is traded in the world. You're getting an opportunity. Why would you not risk more? Why would you not want to kind of go any further? And there's just no takers. Even now, there aren't any takers, or very few. Let me put it that way. You compare the same with what's going on, for example, with tech and AI, etc., in the US. And I mean, on one hand, you have people thinking of putting data centers on Mars and so on and so forth, and you have others believing in it to let the valuation of a company run into trillions. And here we are, not even willing to put money when you have a short demand, and so on and so forth. So I feel very, very strongly about the fact, and I don't think Indian industry, particularly when it comes to manufacturing, I think we just have a trader mindset, a trading mindset. I think as someone, I don't know who said we are a nation of shopkeepers. I think there's value to that comment.
Napoleon about Britain.
Napoleon about Britain, but I don't know whether the same was said about India, but I think we are a nation of shopkeepers. We like to see what we get in the morning, in the evening, you've created an extra buck, and we're very happy with that. And that is disappointing. It's the job of industry to take risk, to be bold, to manage that risk. If you're not doing that fundamental duty, then what the hell are we doing? And I really push back on Indian industry really hard on this one.
So I think that's a very good point to bring in others. And Ram, anything that you would like to? Well, you have to use a mic, sorry.
Some things I was saying about my background will resonate with Banmali, so I was happy to hear that. So certainly my field, but because I had my wife is an entrepreneur, my daughter is an entrepreneur, but I had no connection or head for entrepreneurship or business. But I'm going to push back against your last thing. I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you that, barring a few exceptions, including Forbes Marshall, particularly high-tech, high engineering, we are discoverers, we are looking for shortcuts. By we, I mean Indian industry. But living in Bangalore, I've been hearing, and Sudhakar actually will probably know more than me about this, about some very interesting companies innovating, small, young, 35-year-old entrepreneurs with an engineering background. Innovating in aerospace, in EVs, not Ola. Let's go one. Right? And so I've been just hearing from people, my nephew is in one of these companies, very interesting kind of technical innovation. So could there be these small jumps somewhere, so which are not the big companies we're talking about, which are really shocking?
Absolutely right, Ram. I think there would be, and it's good to see the number of startups, etc., coming out. One, there should be many more, and maybe it's another subject, but I don't think we can solve the so-called problem of jobs by actually creating jobs. I think we've got to create entrepreneurs, and that kind of feeds into your point. But just take any one of those examples. I happen to be helping one of them in the manufacturing space. For these very people, just to get funding, it is so challenging. It is so challenging.
Yeah.
The same ecosystem, if you look at in the States, I mean, an idea which is half as good can get 5 times the amount of funding as you would get in India. Why is that not happening? And that's where, again, I kind of push back that, is it a question of being risk averse? You don't see something really immediate. And this is particularly so, or I think it's further magnified when it comes to manufacturing. On services, etc., maybe it's still a trifle easy, but when it comes to manufacturing, I think the challenge is even deeper.
Yeah. No, I think very much. Let's open it up to questions from the floor. So, related to, and especially around this topic of, the courage of Indian industry and wanting to invest in manufacturing and everything else. So, yeah.
Just to add to what you have said, because in Bangalore, I meet a lot of the young people in the startup ecosystem and so on. And the most difficult thing is getting funding. There are lots of people who would love to do something, who have ideas, but they struggle to get funded. And I think that's one of the key problems. Really. And secondly, the people who are these, the seed capital people and all these seeds and so on, a whole lot, they just do the same thing, all of them. I mean, I have never seen people who are move like a herd. They say the warmth in the center of the herd. That's exactly what you see. Because either they say, we are all doing, right now, of course, it's AI. Before that, it could have, we only do clean energy. We only do, whatever it is. And nobody looks at something that's even slightly out. They always say, this is the thing, that I think is a huge impediment. And should there be more encouragement of these young startups, there'll be a lot more happening.
Well, absolutely, Sujata. And I think the difference that I find is maybe in India, it's more around certain fads of the time, whereas if you just compare it with in the US, for example, I think they bet on people. Even if you take SpaceX, what's the bet on? I think the bet is on Elon Musk. Yeah. It's on his vision. It's on his whatever. Forget how many of them even understand space. How many of them understand what it takes to put a data center or whatever anyway. But it's on betting on him as an individual. And I think they're still struggling to answer the question that what happens to all of this if Elon Musk for some reason, is not able to. But why can't we look at the inherent potential of people and bet on people, that even if one idea that an individual has might fail, but we believe in the person to come up with another one, and that's the bet that we're taking. I don't think we've made that transition as yet. We've yet to move towards, looking at the people and betting on those. I don't know if I'm right.
So
I have
No, let's go to Shivang and then.
Thank you so much. Shivang Maria, Tata Chemicals. I want to connect the courage of taking a risk and taking a layered connect with the upbringing and the values of the generations, and taking a step back. Is it linking to somewhere the fear of failure and the way we are brought up, that if you don't do good marks, if you're not an IIT, IIM, then you are somebody who's not competent enough? And is it really playing out with the decision making even when you are at a leadership level? Still that on the mindset, where we see in the counter examples in the society like the US, where even failure is celebrated, like college dropouts really make a good. So how do you see that the root cause somewhere where not taking a risk is somewhere rooted into the upbringing of the generations? I don't know if there is too much of a layering there in it, but I was trying to make a connect.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, I mean, and I think that has been spoken about, written also, that is our fear of failure. Do we accept failure, and so on and so forth? Clearly, that is an issue. But I would say that even if you can, and there's a certain cost of failure as well, right? Sorry, and I think in India, even if the cost of failure might be low, meaning that you can afford that failure, but even then, perhaps we are not willing to look at those instances. But more than that, I wonder whether we are constrained by our imagination in really thinking way beyond the incremental. Let's say a SpaceX-like idea would to be floated in India. How many people in this country would go and contribute to such a public offering? Or if any company in India were to come out with a phenomenal product, but which is really way out there, would we believe in it? And I think there is a certain, I don't know why, are we diffident in terms of thinking big? And I'm leaving that as a question. I don't have an answer, but I do feel that we need to encourage, particularly our youngsters, to think much bigger, way beyond imagination, way beyond what is seemingly real. Let it be wild, because if you start from there, then maybe you'll end up somewhere. But if you're going to start with, I have to succeed. I have to. This thing has to work in a certain time frame. I'm not sure that's where a country of our size and mission.
What about in larger firms? That say startups. Yeah, take your point very, very much. See, right now, even Elon Musk, at the end of the day, this is not his first venture, right? He has a track record. He has a track record where there were a lot of naysayers. He's proved it right, even in SpaceX, definitely earlier in Tesla. And whatever you may think about him and, his morals and everything else, but he's an incredibly successful individual. And so he's a very visible sort of demonstrator of this. Do you see, wouldn't you need to have this happen first, or at least in parallel in larger companies? That more companies like the Tatas that have invested in electronics in such a massive way, with no formal purchase order, right? As you said, in investing 20,000 crores without a purchase order and firmly in place it takes guts, it takes that courage, and it takes that confidence that you have what it takes to succeed and turn it into something productive. One could argue that in India, you see this. I mean, I have an article in today's Indian Express, by the way, where they changed the title of the article from the title that I had put was Nayanta Conversations, right? And they changed it to Indian industry doesn't lack ambition. And I didn't say that. I mean, that's not what the article says. But anyway, but I actually think that I share your view that we lack that courage and we lack that ambition actually, and in our large firms, and that are wanting to take risk with things. And I can think of several real companies that have no debt, large amounts of cash on the balance sheet, and say they're willing to invest but don't, and there isn't that drive to sort of say, look, we want to invest more, what are we going to invest in, and so on. So I mean, speak to that a bit.
Yeah, and Naushad, let me take that a step further, and I'd love to get Ram's views on this, which is, I think, if you go back in history, even 100 years, the entrepreneurial spirit shown by people at that time was, I think, many degrees more.
I mean, look at Tata Steel, right? It was
I was about to come to that. I mean, if I just kind of talk about the Tatas, and look at Tata Steel, look at this hydroelectric plant not too far away from here. You go back 120 years, you're sitting on a horseback, looking at wild mountains, and you say, I'm going to build a hydro dam this place, make a lake, and build a hydroelectric plant. Or go into Naxal-infested, tribal-infested area to set up a steel plant, bring in people. I mean, where is that entrepreneurial spirit now? What has happened over the years that we've become so lax, complacent, comfortable? I don't know. Because I do feel that we earlier on had far more willingness to take risk. There was a certain national commitment towards, the
Yep.
nation building and all of that. We seem to have become a little lazy and too comfortable. Am I right? Am I exaggerating this, or I don't know. I'd love to hear from you, Ram.
Yeah, Raj.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, can I think comment and then ask the question? I had 2 or 3 kinds of reactions, and one is, I think Nayanta has a role to play. But one comment is just look at, since you mentioned IIT. We went to IIT at a time when 80% of IIT went abroad for a master's. It was the done thing, it was the assumed thing. 20% stayed in India. And the observation I have is that if I take the most conservative, risk-averse student who went abroad from an IIT, 50% of them became entrepreneurs. The same person, if they had stayed in India, for sure, their career peak would have been the CEO of a software company, or they would have stayed on a risk-averse, traditional kind of career route. So there is definitely an aspect of environment. The second dimension, why does everybody do the same type of startups? I think if we get more diverse people with more intense personal experiences, because it's when you don't have personal experiences and something to care deeply about, that you say, so a lot of people who are becoming entrepreneurs are in love with the idea of entrepreneurship. That's different from an entrepreneur as a mindset. The third, and this is a tough one, and I'm going out on the table. I think perhaps we are very deeply colonized intellectually. And many of us don't believe, because the way we judge, I mean, for instance, you say world-class university. What's your idea of a world-class university? How can we be like Stanford or Oxford? You'll never be world-class if you think like that. Because you have to say, I have to have an original model and I can create something in India which is better than the world. And when you say that, people say, isn't that too ambitious?
Yeah.
That's stupid. Because if that is your definition of too ambitious, you are going to be playing catch up for the rest. So, somewhere I believe the Brits deeply colonized a generation of Indians. And I think that and this is probably.
So can I respond?
Yeah, but Ram very vigorously
Because
waving his finger.
I don't agree actually on that.
I profoundly disagree.
Okay, good.
You see, Karl Marx said, he said, the British colonized India through the vilest of motives. He was dead right. The British colonized India through the vilest of motives, to exploit us, to take our resources, to subjugate us. But then Marx added, they were an unconscious tool of history. Because they, with due apologies, they gave us a kick in our backside. Had the British not colonized us, no Indian would ever have attacked the inequities of the caste system. No Indian would ever have said women need equal rights the way Ambedkar and Gandhi and Nehru did. So it's a much more complex, thing. So the British had very nuanced, contradictory, complex things. But the reason we became the way we are is because of the caste system. It ossified us. It made us satisfied with reciting mantras. It may have made us good at software, but certainly not in manufacturing. So I think it's possible. So sorry, that's what I think.
Because that's the idea.
Yeah,
Sure.
and so I in a different way, I also disagree with this thing about being colonized by the British mentality. And my argument would be that you should be aware of the world and be aware of what's really good out there. But then you should not want to take that as good enough. You should want to do better. So without question, but I think to try to do better without knowing what the best is. It's important to know what the best is, because that's what tells you that you can do better. And that's what tells you also, you see, you need to combine, I believe, an awareness of the world without a deference to it, without saying that, hey, listen, this is the best, so I will try to get to the best. No, you have to be better than the best, and you have to start with that.
I'm only saying this.
Yeah.
Has this been done anywhere else in the world is a wrong reason for rejecting an idea.
Yeah.
Very often in India, an idea is rejected on the ground that nobody in the West has done it before. It is a criteria that people put. It is a question that is asked. Mashankar was speaking about it.
But that's our choice.
Yeah, but it happens. It happens. It's quite not uncommon.
But that's our choice. Yeah. No, sorry.
No, I think that's it. One more dimension, I mean, looking at the future of industry and what's our dream from industry, I think one more point that I'd make is that the trust between industry and society has to be rebuilt. We cannot visualize an industry of the future that is so suspect as far as the normal man in the street, even the government is concerned. And I do hope that even industry, one of the objectives would have to be, is money the only way to measure the success of industry? Especially in a situation like India, the impact and the difference that you're making to society and the lives of people, is that not important? Why do we still have, and again, I'm being provocative, Naushad, and please forgive me if I'm going against CII norms, etc. Why would we still fight to lower minimum wages as industry, right? Or fight to find ways and means not to let wages go up, etc., etc. Now, when you see this kind of conduct and behavior and the ferocity with which all these things get opposed, you wonder how can then in the same breath talk about, an industry which is, this is not, you don't hear this in other parts of the world that are, striving. In fact, they're looking at how are we able to maybe enrich our people better? Are there other ways of, enriching our people? One of the things with SpaceX and Elon Musk is talking about, how many millionaires I've created, out of this, which is out of value creation. You've done something innovative that has created value, and that is what you share, not out of, kind of scrounging around and so on. But the larger point being, I think the trust between industry and society, at least in India, I think the gaps are far too wide. Let me not go down the path of, income disparities and what have you, but I think it is something that industry will need to focus on. We don't live in a bubble.
And we'll come to �𝗔𝗿.
Yeah.
I just wanted one addition on the debate, Brijesh. You mentioned as the Nordic civic sense as a very important, significant glue in the way the society works. And the debate that we are having of Indian industry being taking a role beyond themselves, and I'm just exaggerating the point you made, is not only look at money as a single reason to exist, but society as a large. It's a reflection of the way our civic sense has evolved. What I'm saying is, as an individual, when we look at civic sense, and when we look at industry as a civic sense of whether it's marginalized workers or environment or any other work, isn't there a very direct parallel where as a civic society we are becoming individualistic, and the moment I'm outside my house, my civic sense changes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we need to address it. I think we can't live this schizophrenic existence that when you come into the workplace, you kind of enter this really plush office surrounding, everything is very nice. And the moment you finish and you step out, you're kind of breaking all traffic rules. And while you're there, you're supposed to follow ISO 9000 and my commitment to sustainability and what have you. This is schizophrenic existence. I don't think this is sustainable. Again, I go back to the Nordics. There is zero difference between the life of an individual outside the office and inside the office. Zero. the way what one would eat, where one would sit, the kind of, you know what I mean? It's absolutely no difference. Also in terms of, what is it, and somewhere, what is it that drives an individual? And again, I go back to Nordics. I mean, I had a colleague of mine, Kari, when I started over there. My ambition was, I started as a sales engineer, I want to become an assistant manager, a manager, etc. Kari's ambition in life was, I want to finish my work at 4, do it well, go back home, spend time with my family, tend to my garden, and that's it. That was his ambition. And I'm just taking him as an example. If that's what their society is built on, that it's not your work that defines you, but you have an individual presence, etc., which can also define you, I think it makes a difference. And maybe some of that has to change, for us as well.
And a Nayanta question
Yeah.
is related to you as a founder, because when I listen to the purpose of business, I always wonder I don't have an answer to this. Because we just designed an economics major. I think it's fairly, still we are teaching. So should there be nuance to the way we teach the purpose of the firm in academia? Because right now the foundational model is the firm exists to maximize profits. Shareholder value, but shareholder value is not taught as in microeconomics.
Sorry, shall we take that question as well? Yeah. Please go ahead.
You want to answer?
It's different. So, short answer, absolutely. I mean, I'm surprised that we don't have it, right? And I think somewhere you've got to connect it with the individual as well, because the individual is not different from the collective individual then as an organization. Somewhere I think that connect has to be, clearly has to be found. No question about it.
We have a sustainability course separately, but I'm saying microeconomics.
I mean, I would actually argue that profit maximization only exists in economics theory.
That's important to teach it.
Huh. Yeah. So, yeah.
This is your chance.
Yeah, so because you talk so much about Nordic, I studied in Sweden, I studied innovation in management and innovation economics in
Found my
Sweden.
soulmate.
I stayed there, I worked there. So I know the culture is so different there. And when we saw in our universities, when there is a department, I studied in Chalmers, so they had a department of physics, different sciences, along with a management institute which is inside the university. And whenever every new innovations which is coming out of the lab, these are incubated in that particular management institute. And where there is people who are crossing with each other, there is no boundary to the university, and just like it's integrated with the society. My question is, in Nayanta, as all our groups, we do a group project that we call Grand Challenge, and I am doing one with R&D, why Indian industry is not spending much in R&D. I mean, in comparison to what people are doing it in the outside the world. We did study and spoke with some CEOs, we got certain issues, but I think this is also a question on risk-taking ability, because when you put the money in R&D, you think of the long-term future and build those innovations and technologies which will take you to the future. So, just want to ask you, why do you think that mindset? What stops the industry to spend more within India? I mean, as an Indian organization, compared to anybody which is in the world, like the data clearly shows it. But what is it, in your view, that's inhibiting us to do it? Is it the risk-taking only or something else?
I wish, to be honest, I'm not informed enough to answer that directly. I think part of it is, of course, to do with risk-taking, but again, if I compare it back with the Nordics, and so happy to meet you, a country like Finland, 5.5 million people, they own about a dozen global brands with over 30% global market share. And you wonder, how do they do it? What is it? What is different? And no matter which way, I look at it, the one thing that I found which was unique is, and Naushad, you spoke about it yesterday at the SIA conference, is their primary education and early education system. It is so unique. it is so different. It is so innovative. And it's not that they're resting on their laurels in terms of how they teach. They've recently started something different about a couple of years ago, which is so far out there in terms of how you teach children that, people are still kind of trying to absorb it. So I think, short answer, I think it's got to do also with the way your mind gets trained, and which ultimately boils down to early education. And I do believe we are not paying enough attention to primary education and early education in this country. And I do believe that is one of the, unless we address that, even in all our efforts on skill development and all that, is I don't think it's going to yield enough results.
Yeah, Pradeep? Pawan and then Pradeep. Maybe we'll take two questions at a time so that we can move around.
So I am also fortunate enough to be now working with a Norwegian company who is a technology partner, and I share the kind of positive experiences that you also mentioned, and go there very often, and I see the same kind of infrastructure, etc. My question was that you have worked, and it's an extension of what we have been discussing. You have worked with a European Nordic company. You have worked with a US company, GE, which is based on, which is innovation is the hallmark of GE. And now you're of course with the India's Tata, which you all know. What do you see as the key differences in terms of the culture, ethos, and the way the board thinks, and the whole way it is driven from inside, which is probably could also be some of the outcomes which we have been discussing so far. So some thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. So do we take two questions?
Sure, you want to take Pradeep's?
No,
Yeah.
on your part of primary education, I think how a primary education or education structure is also another key point, because I think we are not a country where we promote learning by practice or making your hand dirty. It is not something which is very common. I mean, that was one comment which I wanted to make.
Yeah. No, I think, and Pradeep, I mean, just to kind of address your question, you're absolutely right. But when you look at early education, it is even earlier than that stage, right? I mean, if you believe that every child can learn, you have to start with that premise, right? You can't start with the premise that some are bright and some are not. I mean, that's just not true. They may learn differently, they may have different interests, but can we address our system rather than put everyone through one grinder and machine? I think that is what we need to crack, and that too on scale. Because, but you're right, I kind of agree with you. To your question, yes, I think learned a lot and three different experiences. I won't take too much time, but GE, more than a company, I mean, founded by an inventor like an Elon Musk, which was Edison, who was also crazy about, coming out with new products and so on and so forth. But I would say, I would recognize GE more as, if you believe in the power of people and talent, you can pretty much solve anything and everything. And that is what GE is to me. Their people processes are so strong that, I mean, they just can't go wrong. And I think despite all the trough and all that GE went through over the last maybe 5-7 years, they are back again. If today you see the sum part of all the GE entities, it is about 800 billion. By far, it would be the largest industrial conglomerate in the world. And I think that is what I took back from GE. You believe in people, don't stop investing in them, be absolutely manic about recognizing and differentiating as far as talent is concerned. You just cannot go wrong. By the way, in 2008, after the financial crisis, when GE got hit really, really badly. The one area where they did not stop spending money, and GE used to spend about $2 billion on training and development every year. That was one area where money was not cut. It just went on and on. We spoke about Nordics, so I won't cover that. But just coming back to Tatas and India, and I think one recognizes that, at least I have learned to respect the value of, I won't call it brand, but reputation, what it can do. Just the word Tata, you go out there and you talk to people, people want to come and just partner with you because you're a Tata. They would do anything, not even knowing what is behind. Do you have any people to work behind you? Doesn't matter. You're a Tata. We believe you, and therefore we want to work with you. How do you develop that kind of a reputation? How do you develop that kind of culture, in a manner of speaking? I think that is something to be really studied. And I believe that, of course, we all know building culture is not easy. Maintaining it is even more difficult. But culture is also very fragile. It breaks very easily. And if we have to change culture to keep in times with whatever, I think you need to prepare an organization for that change of culture. And many a time, I think we don't do that. And that's another learning that I have from the Tatas, that if you want to change things, change direction, etc., you got to spend time first in preparing the organization. By that, I mean basically people. And do we do enough of that? But the power of reputation is just so intense. And where does that come from? That simply because the commitment of purpose that the Tatas have is so different than anyone else. That is what everyone feels so passionate about, feels so committed to and attracted to. Nobody really talks about the size of Tatas in money terms. It's not about what you do. Tatas have always been, and I think still is, about how you do it. And I think that is really, really important to me. So those are the things that I learned. Focus on people. Innovation, of course, we spoke about the Nordics and so on. And in terms of building a reputation and culture, and one last point to make about culture is, I think, you kind of learn that what you tolerate is what defines your culture. So the exceptions that you make, the allowances that you give, that is what then defines who you are. Not what you keep doing. That doesn't really define you. It's, I think, those exceptions. And I think Tatas have done a fairly good job in making sure that, you just stick to it. Don't move away.
But Mike, can you just elaborate on that last point, that culture is defined by the allowances and exceptions that you make, with a couple of examples?
Well, I'm tempted to give examples closer to home, but
that would be fun. You should. You can use 𝗕𝗺 𝗔𝗴𝗍 as an example.
No, but let me still use general. When I said closer to home, I mean closer maybe to Tatas and so on and so forth. But let me still be general. But if you have certain norms around, let's say, retirement age, right, and you change it, you make exceptions. What does it say? You may follow it for 100 years. 1 year you change it. What does it say? If you make a difference, I'm kind of taking trivial examples, but I think it's just kind of trying to make my point.
Yep.
And those are the things then that begin to define you. And slowly you feel, but I can do a one-off and it's okay. That one-off becomes a two-off, becomes a three-off, and then that gets to be what it is. And finally, I think, as you've seen in the Tatas, as a leader, I think you have to be all the time walking the talk and zero room for any deviation or exceptions. Zero, right? Because you're being watched, you're being monitored all the time. And one saw that with Ratan Tata in spades. The man never, ever slipped in terms of his personal conduct. Never. And that kind of, he was who he was. Lots to learn.
I had a question because I've
Yeah.
heard Banmali speak once before, and there was a theme that he touched on, and a difficult theme. You talk about the Air India Ahmedabad crash and the role that you played post that, and what you learned from that.
Great point, Ranjan. I think in my entire career, there are two things that I think I got the opportunity to work, really changed me in many ways and changed my life in many ways. The first was COVID. I was asked to lead the COVID charge for the Tata Group. It was a fairly massive effort. We ended up spending about 1,500 crores, during COVID. But it changed the way, first the decision itself, and I still remember the first, when it started, it was Bombay Municipal Corporation kind of saying that, we need a couple of crores and so on and so forth. And I was to look into it, and I said, but 2 crores, 3 crores, there's a lot of money, why should we do this, etc. And I went cribbing, I think it was to Chandra, I think, and he said, let me come back to you. And he comes back after, I think, a couple of days, and he says, look here, we've decided we're going to spend 1,000 crores. Okay, so that's your budget. Plus another 500 crores is going to come from the trust. So it's 1,500 crores. Now, this is, of course, across all the group companies and everyone. But we'll, of course, coordinate it. Now you go figure, how is it that you're going to make, a difference? And remember, those were the times when you're talking about oxygen cylinders, about hospital beds, there are people dying, and so on and so forth. I think that whole experience had a very serious impact on what I did. And hats off to an organization. Which organization has the courage to come and say, okay, here, go take 1,000 crores and spend it. This is not the time to be scrounging around. Amazing. Air India, after we had the crash, June 12th, of course you have compensation and so on and so forth, but one decision that was made pretty much right away, and again, it was Chandra who made that decision. He said, look, we've got to go and meet the families of each and every victim, of each and every person who passed away. And I said, Chandra, are you sure you want to do that? It's not going to be easy. The emotions are going to run high, etc. He said, I understand, but that's the right thing to do. And you got to do it. And by me, I mean me and a few others. There was Naren and so on and so forth, just to go and meet with people. What a eye-opening experience that has been. And without taking too much time, most of the people, by the way, the flight left from Ahmedabad to London. Most of the people on that flight were from smaller cities around Ahmedabad. They were not from the main city itself, rural part, 2 hours away, 3 hours away. We went and met them in their homes in smaller places and villages. The amount of, the kind of decency that these people had and exhibited in those meetings completely overwhelmed me. These are people with relatively modest means. Not once, and I've myself met more than maybe 50 of them, not one was any shouting, screaming, anger, none of that. The same thing in cities, there were a couple of cases. And I recognized this is the real India. This is our culture. What an eye-opener. We don't recognize this. We don't see this. I'd gone with the preconceived notion, my lawyer is on call and, I've got some safety, somebody on call. And that's the kind of, and not once, not twice, but over and over and over again. You felt proud as a country. I felt proud as an Indian. That this is where true India lives, this is how true India behaves. It really moved me. It really moved me.
Thank you.
Last 2 questions.
Last 2 questions. Yes.
So Banmali, on
We'll take the 2 together.
Sure.
Yeah.
on the Indian industry growth and what challenges we are talking about, that we are not showing courage, R&D related spending is not a visa mark. I see a basic probably mindset problem in Indian industry, where I feel that small, that's a micro and small and medium enterprises
they are facing a tremendous challenge in the working capital in the cash flow. And they are a very integral part of the growth, and you can't probably survive without them being part of this journey. I think big industry in India need to think about that and make sure that they also pay on time, help them kind of release their cash flow. And I think it's a mindset issue in big industries that I can control and dominate my small vendors. Do you think that that is changing, or it's going to be the same mindset what we have been hearing last many years? Today also it's probably more or less same. Do you see that as a changing? Otherwise, without them, I'm not sure how we'll be able to succeed.
Okay, we take Harpreet's question.
So, it's actually a complementing question. So when we look at India and going forward, India's next 2047 vision, two things which come is that we need to accelerate our pace in changing many things and faster in an organized manner if we really want to be ahead. For that, I think a lot of responses in your own conversation today came out. But if I have to link it back, power and money are two elements which can, if used well, do a lot of good things. And if used not well, it can really make the system go sick. So, but we can't do away with it. So, what would be 2 or 3 senses of wisdom which one would want to exercise for the youth of India? That how do we exercise power and money well?
Well, that's a really big question. But Ramesh, to the earlier one, I think so. First, if you just go beyond what's our objective or what's our purpose in business, it kind of we're coming back to the beginning. If you're just going to measure it through money terms, you'll come out with one answer. But if you're going to measure it through, okay, am I going to create an impact, or is that one of my objectives, particularly as a large company, on society? I'm part of society and I have a duty beyond just, my shareholders, etc. If that's the way you approach it, I think you come out with different answers. On your point about, let's say, developing sub-suppliers, Cummins, a Pune-based company, and I think it was when Ravi was perhaps the chairman or even little before, they developed a whole supply chain around, for making their, I'm sorry.
Late 60s and
Late
70s.
60s, yes. How did they do it? By identifying small industries, giving them capital. Okay, here's money, take it. Go set up. Ultimately, it's going to benefit me because I'm developing a supply chain. Not that, okay, you need to go and do it. And I think that was such a successful method of doing it. They built up a supply chain. A lot of Pune owes its prosperity to having been built. How many companies have done that? Why can't we do that? I think we should do it. We're trying to do some of it in Tata Electronics because we need a supply chain. So I think if we move our objectives beyond, I think we will find answers. You're right. I think, again, I'll kind of connect it with the larger objective. I do feel in terms of the workforce, I'll just give you another example. Tata Electronics, we have about 80,000, 90,000 people now. Youngsters, most of them women, age group 19-23. Again, I'm choosing my words a little carefully. I wish I would see more passion and commitment from these youngsters coming from rural areas. And I think we need to do something to change the attitude and the preparedness of the workforce that is coming in. So I would say that industry also needs to take a look at, say, the 13, 14-year-olds who will become 18 over the next 3 or 4 years. Focus on that set of people for the next 5, 10, 15 years. Invest money, make their, kind of teach them the right things. And I'm not talking about how to be a plumber, electrician, etc. That industry can do very easily. It's just the basics of communication, of certain, many of the things, Ranjan, that you talk about. And I think, we would have done our service. So put some money there, invest some money there, and don't just leave it to government. That's what I would suggest.
So, Banmali, the last question is the Nayanta question
Yes.
on reading and reading habits. And what do you read? What are you reading now? What do you read because you feel you have to read it? And what do you read for sheer pleasure?
So one thing as where we started, I think the one that I'm reading now is The Winter War, because it was given, I didn't ask for the book, I got it, but once I picked it up, it's interesting reading. And within that, there's a subplot of a sniper who was really, these are all facts, it's not fiction, so these are all facts, but little known, and it's really interesting, about that. Other than that, Naushad, I think, whatever, let's say, catches my interest. So these days, it's music. I happen to learn music. I study it. And I was fascinated with the idea that if you go to a lot of classical music, Indian classical music in the country today, is taught in a certain way. You'll hear the same songs. You can actually, I don't know if there are people here who are familiar with Indian classical music, but you'll hear the same song. So for a particular rag, there's a particular song. There's a way in which it is taught. And all this was set up by this person called 𝗕𝗺 𝗙𝗵𝗄, who in fact came from Pune. And he, in a sense, codified Indian classical music to be taught. And I just got interested in that and I started reading about it. And there was this lady from Columbia University, I think, who's written a book on this. And so that's the other interest that I have on reading on how he codified it. And I think where she starts from is that it is said that colonialism had an impact on everything, but not on Indian classical music. And she says that's not right. And she gives this example of 𝗕𝗺 and Paluskar, who was the other proponent of classical music and how that does it. I just got into it out of sheer curiosity, but I'm enjoying reading that. And those are the kind of things so there's nothing planned or it's whatever catches one's fancy.
Banmali, thank you so much. Thank you.